Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix was released in 2007 and was directed by David Yates and is based on the fifth Harry Potter novel by J.K. Rowling, and it stars Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint once again. And the IMDb synopsis reads as, with their warning about Lord Voldemort's return scoffed at, Harry and Dumbledore are targeted by the wizard authorities as an authoritarian bureaucrat slowly seizes power at Hogwarts. I have a lot of admiration for the fifth Harry Potter movie, and I've been a fan of it since day one. Order of the Phoenix, the book, has always been one of my least favorite Harry Potter books to read, and this film somehow did what I thought was originally impossible, and has since become one of my favorite movies in the franchise. I've gone off and on for many years now as to what my favorite Harry Potter film has been, and Order of the Phoenix has climbed that ladder quite a bit, and I even assumed it to be my favorite in the franchise just a few years ago. But after this most recent rewatch, I can't say it's my favorite out of the lot, but I can say it's my second favorite, which is funny to me. Order of the Phoenix is not a fan favorite of the franchise. Despite having some very memorable moments and a fantastic villain, it's often put near the bottom. Just looking at Rotten Tomatoes, it has the second lowest score with a 78% critic approval rating, which is still good in the long run. I've just always found Order of the Phoenix a bit underappreciated and think it's honestly the best work done by David Yates in this entire franchise. I know Yates is a controversial figure in the Potter community, as people have a lot of criticism about his style of directing, myself included. Just wait until we get to Half-Blood Prince. But at the time, I think Yates was the perfect choice to helm this film, and after being a bit disappointed by Mike Newell's direction in Goblet of Fire, I wanted a director I could trust, like I had with Alfonso Cuarón, and to a large extent, Chris Columbus. But we'll get into a lot of those thoughts as we get farther along in the review. In the meantime, let's do what we always do here and go behind the scenes to see just how this film was made. David Yates, who had been known for directing British television, was chosen as the film's director after Mike Newell, the director of Goblet of Fire, Guillermo del Toro, Matthew Vaughn, and Mira Nair all declined offers to direct. Yates believed he had been approached by the studio because they believed he could handle an edgy and emotional film with a political backstory, which had been seen in several of his television projects, such as State of Play, Sex Traffic, and The Girl in the Cafe. Yates and producer David Heyman both saw the film as a political one that focused on teen rebellion and the abuse of power, and Heyman believed Yates was just the person to focus on the politics of the wizarding world without being heavy-handed. Steve Kloves, who had written the screenplays for the first 4 Harry Potter films and the 3 after this film, decided not to return, citing other commitments, but has gone on to say he's not exactly sure why he turned down the offer in the first place. And so Michael Goldenberg was hired to write the script. He had even been considered to write the script for the first film as well before Kloves took that duty. Order of the Phoenix is the longest Harry Potter book, and interestingly enough, the second shortest Harry Potter film after Deathly Hallows Part 2. And Michael Goldenberg and Yates worked hard to cut the film down to a reasonable length without sacrificing the heart of the story. Goldenberg wished to stay true to the spirit of the book rather than to the letter, and even Rowling went on to tell them they had permission to take liberties where they felt it was necessary, only asking that in the end they make a great film. With this in mind, several subplots, scenes, and minor characters had to be cut, especially when it came to scenes that did not directly tie into Harry and his journey, much like what was attempted in Goblet of Fire, another massive book. However, even though they couldn't put everything from the book in the film, Goldenberg felt he could at least pay homage by placing things in the background. Because of this, all Quidditch, St. Mungo's, and Dobby scenes were cut from the script. Paul Harris served as choreographer and was responsible for creating the physical language of wand combat for the fight scenes. Stuart Craig also returned once again as set designer and was tasked with adding a number of new sets, such as the atrium in the Ministry of Magic, which was over 200 feet in length, making it the largest and most expensive set built for the film. The design was inspired by the early London Underground stations by imitating classical architecture with ceramic tile. Grimmauld Place also contained a large black family tapestry that spread across 3 walls and had all the names of the Black family, which were created by Rowling herself. As for the Hall of Prophecies, it was entirely built digitally since the reset time for the set would have taken too long. Sets from previous films, such as the trial scene from Goblet of Fire, were redressed and expanded upon for Harry's trial in the Ministry. Principal photography began on February 7th, 2006 and wrapped in November of that year. Filming was put on 2-month hiatus so Radcliffe and Watson would complete their examinations. The film's budget was reportedly $100 million, making it the largest for the series at that point, and Leavesden Film Studios was used once again for many of the interior scenes for the movie. Interestingly, Yates stated he originally shot a 3-hour cut of Order of the Phoenix, but material had to be cut as the film was considered 45 minutes too long. The film required over 1,400 visual effects shots, and systems such as the soul-capturing technology were used to bring characters like the giant Grop to life. Nicholas Hooper was tasked with scoring the film, replacing Patrick Doyle this time, and used several different variations of the Hedwig theme in the film. He wanted the score to be like the book and much darker than in previous installments, with emphasis placed on 2 themes involving Dolores Umbridge and Voldemort invading Harry's mind. The film made its worldwide premiere on July 11th, 2007 in the US and the next day in the UK on the 12th. And with a final budget of $150 million, the film would make $942.2 million at the worldwide box office. Critical response for the film was favorable, but lacked the fanfare seen with previous installments. Roger Ebert, a fan of the franchise, awarded the film 2.5 out of 4 stars, believing there was no longer much joy in the Harry Potter films. However, reviews remained generally favorable, and performances such as Imelda Stouten as Dolores Umbridge and Helena Bonham Carter as Bellatrix Lestrange received wide acclaim. Ivana Lynch, who played Luna Lovegood, was also praised for a spellbinding performance. Order of the Phoenix might not have won over critics like previous entries, but it continued the trend of leading the franchise down a darker, more mature path and is an important stepping stone in that story. So, with that all out of the way, let's finally go into my thoughts on the film. When it comes to Harry Potter films, I feel like Order of the Phoenix tends to get overlooked, aside for when it comes to the introduction of probably the franchise's best villain, Dolores Umbridge. I've always had a soft spot for this movie, and I would go so far as to say, and this might be a bit controversial, but I think Order of the Phoenix is the best adaptation of Harry Potter from book to screen. As someone who ranks the Order of the Phoenix book among one of my least favorites in the franchise, the fact that I would place the movie so high on a list, I think, is a testament to how well this film was adapted. By stripping away all the fluff, the many side plots, and trimming characters here and there, we get a film that is as streamlined as any of the films in this franchise have ever been. It reminds me a lot of Prisoner of Azkaban in the way it challenges our main character on a deeply emotional level, and that's the kind of stuff that really resonates with me. Also, before we get into this review proper, I want to bring up something I mentioned in my Prisoner of Azkaban review, and that is the trajectory of the series moving forward, and how the franchise, starting with Azkaban, is never the same again. As with each new director, the films change styles, tones, and music and aesthetic to the point it's hard to believe some of these movies belong in the same franchise. We are devoid of the light and color of the first two films, and Chris Columbus's original idea of a franchise that gradually gets darker in tone, also gets darker in color palette, doesn't really end up happening in the way he originally envisioned. Prisoner of Azkaban moved to a more blue hue, and Goblet of Fire attempted to return to the look of the first two films. But Order of the Phoenix goes farther than any of the films in the franchise had done at this point, and makes a film that is very gray and drab, and really just not that visually appealing. But in this instance, despite it being inconsistent, it works for the film Yates and his team were trying to make. Similar to how Prisoner of Azkaban's style works for that film despite its inconsistencies, Order of the Phoenix is a much bleaker story coming right off of the events of Goblet of Fire, and as such we begin to see the wizarding world as less magical and more dirty and like something you might see in a political thriller than a fantasy film made for children, and yet it somehow works. Yates impressed me with his first outing in this franchise, and I think his mostly very bland style of filmmaking actually works best here. There's plenty of video essays on YouTube that really seem to bash David Yates as the one that ruined Harry Potter, or how he's really bad at blocking scenes. And though I would never say he ruined the Harry Potter films, I can at least agree with the second statement. Just watch the Yates directed films and you'll notice a lot of boring shot reverse shots. People just standing and talking with a very flat, uninteresting image, and all of that stuff is present in Order of the Phoenix. But somehow it works in this film. Harry is supposed to feel more alone than ever. There's a large portion of the wizarding world who are against him and believe he has made up this whole story about Voldemort returning. He feels so alone, and there are things happening to him throughout this film that make him question even himself. And Yates's directing style actually pulls this off wonderfully. Let's take Harry's first meeting with Ron and Hermione in the film. It's a simple shot reverse shot scene, but it already shows the disconnect Harry feels as he is on one side of the camera while Ron and Hermione are together on the other side. The blocking is awkward because the moment itself is awkward. Things are different now. The world has changed. That's not to say Yates can't do some pretty innovative or fun camera tricks with the help of his cinematographer. On top of the cold, awkward scenes that are meant to be awkward, there are scenes of the camera moving, following our characters. It's playful. The fight scene at the end of the film has the camera swirling around from battle to battle, and I think gives us a really great glimpse at the chaos of true wizard dueling for the first time in the franchise, or the use of shaky cam, a first for the franchise. It's actually all very well done for this film, and I think everyone deserves a bit more credit when it comes to this. I mentioned how playful the film could be with some of its camera movements, and that's even true in the editing. Order of the Phoenix is actually pretty flashy when it comes to its editing, especially in the montage scenes as we zoom through pages and images of the Daily Prophet newspaper and visit different scenes and hear the thoughts of characters like Cornelius Fudge. It's a fun way of spouting exposition and doing it creatively too. Now, I've spent a lot of time talking about the technical side of the film, especially its style and cinematography. But what about its story and characters? I really think this film does a great job of expanding upon relationships, particularly the one between Harry and his godfather, Sirius Black. Gary Oldman was fantastic as Sirius in the third film, but I think in this one he has a bit more material to shine as the character, and he and Daniel Radcliffe do a great job of making this duo work and feel believable, and you really care about their relationship, and Harry as well. I love the scene where Sirius is saying bye to Harry as he's going off to Hogwarts and gives him a photo of the original Order of the Phoenix. There's a lot of great stuff in that conversation of Sirius basically passing the baton to Harry. Then there's a wonderful scene later on in the Black family home where Sirius and Harry have a heart-to-heart conversation about their troubles, and we learn how Sirius was basically an outcast in his own family, and they bond over this. Daniel Radcliffe is honestly fantastic in these scenes, and it's some of my favorite acting from him in the series. These conversations also help make the impact of Sirius's death even more tragic, which, holy crap, that scene is just masterfully done. I love how they mute Radcliffe's screams as if it's too agonizing to hear, and he runs after Bellatrix Lestrange, played wonderfully by the always great Helena Bonham Carter, and the chaos of that whole scene with the editing and shaky cam make the moment where Harry uses one of the unforgivable curses just so much more impactful. Honestly, Harry truly gets to shine in this movie in a way he really hasn't in any of the other films, as the student finally becomes the teacher, and he and his friends create a club to learn defensive magic for the coming war. It was when watching these scenes I realized just how much Harry had grown as a character from where he started in the first film, and how much Daniel Radcliffe has improved in his own performance. These are some of my favorite scenes. Watching Harry teach the other students all of these different spells that he himself has used. They're fun and lighthearted moments, but we even get some character development thrown in for some of the minor characters, such as Neville, who really starts coming into his own in this film. Also, it's very minor, but I had never noticed how the character of Jenny will often make certain glances at Harry through the film, hinting at her affection for him that will play a bigger part in the next film. I never noticed this stuff before and always thought it felt so out of left field in the next movie, but no, there is actually an attempt to set some stuff up here. I also really enjoyed the opening scene of this movie. It literally starts with Harry sitting alone as he's antagonized by Dudley, who ends up saying some pretty cruel things to him, which leads to the inciting incident in the film where Harry is attacked by Dementors in his hometown. I really like this whole beginning, from the music to, again, the way the camera separates Harry from Dudley and his friends, making him feel entirely alone. Also, I have to mention, as always, it's great getting to see the Dursleys again, even if briefly after being absent in the previous film. One of my favorite sequences in the film has to be the entire Ministry of Magic trial scene. We finally get to see the Ministry in all its glory, and the set is both beautiful and intimidating. I love seeing moments like this that just expand the world without saying anything, and the trial itself is wonderfully tense, with back and forth between Dumbledore and Cornelius Fudge, who is in denial of Voldemort's return. Honestly, it's this movie that fully cemented Michael Gambon's Dumbledore for me. He might not be the best Dumbledore in my opinion, but he plays his scenes in this wonderful, sarcastic way, and has some great scenes later on in the film, such as his really cool escape from Hogwarts. Before we go any farther, I also want to mention some of the new cast members in this one, and one in particular. First off, I have to bring up Evanna Lynch as Luna Lovegood. I love this character. She's a kooky and weird character, and she's honestly a very intriguing one as well, and instantly likable, and Harry builds a friendship with her throughout the film, and he connects with her because they're both being seen as outcasts, and she tries to cheer him up by bringing up her own experiences. Lynch is just wonderful in the role, and definitely a standout for me as one of the best side characters in the franchise. But now we have to talk about probably the best thing in this movie, and that is Imelda Stouten as Dolores Umbridge. Listen, Voldemort is a great villain. A lot of the minor villains are fun, such as Lucius and Draco Malfoy, but for me, Dolores Umbridge is single-handedly, in my eyes, the best villain in this franchise. I have never seen a character played so wonderfully and be so absolutely vile and hateable and an absolute blast to watch. Umbridge comes in as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor and slowly begins to take over the school through her connections with the Ministry, and this is where most of the film's conflict comes from, as the film is really about an inner battle for control of Hogwarts under a tyrannical rule. Imelda Staunton is wonderfully evil and is clearly having so much fun in this role. It's a very memorable performance in my eyes, and as I said before, is the one thing that most people take away from this film. I also love how she meets her end in the film, being carried away by the centaurs into the woods, and Harry's final line to her of, "I must not tell lies," is perfectly executed. There's other things too, like how she creates this little inquisitorial squad, which is made up of Malfoy and his cronies and Filch. We get some great scenes out of this with them trying to find out where Harry and his friends are holding their meetings. There's honestly great gags in this film in general, most involving Filch, such as when he's nailing proclamations to the wall with a huge ladder or pushing all of the people out of the frames of moving paintings. It's really fun stuff. However, for me, Order of the Phoenix has one hell of an exhilarating climax. It might not be as haunting as the previous film's climax, but it's filled with all the stuff I love. Mystery, action, and filled with emotion. Harry has been having dreams all year about a door in the Ministry that's part of the Department of Mysteries, and this stuff is being shown to him by Voldemort, who is invading Harry's mind, which is something he apparently used to do as a form of torture during the last war. So Harry has been learning how to stop this, but still, he believes after seeing a vision that Sirius is in trouble, and so him and the trio and a few other students break into the Ministry, and we get this really cool scene in the Department of Mysteries where we learn it was all a trick so that Harry could retrieve for Voldemort an orb. An orb which has a prophecy detailing that eventually Harry and Voldemort will have to battle again, and one will end up being the victor. After this revelation, we're given a really awesome fight scene between the students and the Death Eaters before the rest of the Order shows up. This fight is awesome, and Yates purposefully wanted the dueling in this film to be messy and chaotic, and I think it really works and gives some nice energy and tension to the fight. But things really get interesting when Dumbledore finally shows up and we get a one-on-one duel between him and Voldemort, and it's as glorious and flashy as you could imagine. I love the sound design in the scene and the methods they use to one-up each other, such as Dumbledore encasing Voldemort in a ball of water or Voldemort summoning a giant fire snake. But once that fight is done, we get the emotional climax where Voldemort enters Harry's mind and Harry has to fight him to push him back out by focusing on all the happy memories with his friends and loved ones. And we get that awesome line from Harry, "You're the weak one, and you'll never know love or friendship, and I feel sorry for you." That's an interesting line to me, showing that Harry, in a way, has some sort of sympathy for Voldemort in this instance. Now, this moment could come off as being very silly, but I think it works for the emotional climax of this story and for establishing a theme for this entire film. And finally, with that theme in place, we end the film with a pretty optimistic ending as Harry declares that they will defeat Voldemort, because they have one thing he doesn't have: something worth fighting for. Before we finish up here, I want to go over a few other things I failed to mention so far. First off, I want to bring up Nicholas Hooper's score. This is probably the weakest of the film soundtracks, and I think a lot of that is due to the music being more mood pieces than anything. But there are a few tracks that I think are really good, such as the moments where Voldemort is entering into Harry's mind, as well as Dolores Umbridge's own theme, which is wonderfully delightful and pompous, and the theme that I will just call Dumbledore's Army theme. It's energetic and just a fun listen. That said, the rest of the score is sadly very forgettable. Also, despite the film having the largest budget at the time, some of the special effects look a little off and have not aged well. The Thestrals, the flying ghostly steeds, look great, as do the Dementors, but my main complaint is Grop, Hagrid's half-brother, who is a fully CGI character, and he just doesn't look very good in my opinion, and doesn't feel like he's actually there. It reminded me of the effects for the troll in Sorcerer's Stone, but that movie was released in 2001, and this was 2007, and they look, to me at least, about the same. Other than those small nitpicks, I genuinely think this is a perfect film. It's one of my favorite Harry Potter movies, and actually has a lot more going for it than I think people give it credit for. Yates' directing actually works quite well for this film. The style works for the story it's trying to tell, and the character work is great, especially from Daniel Radcliffe, Gary Oldman, Michael Gambon, Ivana Lynch, and especially Imelda Stouten, who is just absolute perfection as Dolores Umbridge. I think this movie is highly underrated, and though it doesn't fit with my ideal version of what I wish the Harry Potter films had been, which is the style of the first two movies, I can't deny this works just as well too, and is great in its own right. So, with all that said, I'm gonna give Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix a 9 out of 10. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this review, and I hope I got across why I love this film so much. I don't think it's a very popular opinion, but hey, it's my own opinion, and that's what counts. But what do you think of Order of the Phoenix? Let me know in the comments section below, and as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and stay positive.